to Unity of Blairsville. And we are all standing together. And I thought we'd begin today by telling you a little story about standing together. There were a number of campers with a forest ranger, and they were in the redwood forest, all these towering redwoods all around them. Some of those redwoods were alive when Jesus walked the earth. And there was a child that was there and looked up at these giant trees and said, their roots must go deep, deep into the ground. And the ranger said, you would think so, but not really. That the reason they stand so tall is not because they take their roots as individuals and go so deep into the ground. It's because their roots actually spread out and they actually hold on to one another. And the reason they are able to stand so tall is because they're holding on to one another. So they don't stand as individuals, although it looks that way. They really stand together. And I would say to you at Unity of Blairsville, that's what we're doing. We are standing together. So let's begin or continue our time together in prayer and oneness. If you would, just sort of close your eyes and let us journey to our hearts. Maybe put your hand over your heart. And let's bring to mind the creed of the heart, that our God is love. And each of us is called to be loving. That our race is human. We're born of water, born of spirit. And our religion is oneness. We have the example of Jesus' prayer. I and the Father are one. Our religion is oneness. And these statements, this creed of the heart, it all flows from our foundation statement that there's only one presence and one power in the universe and in my life, God the good, omnipotent. And remaining in our hearts for a moment, let's just rest in silence, letting God be God. I'm in the heart of God. Heart of God is in me. So let the silence enfold us. Let it bind us together as we are together, as we stand together in the silence. Hospitals are once again filling up just as they did this spring. Thank you, dear friend. And so it is. Amen. Well, good morning, everyone. Change is in the air in the North Georgia mountains in the form of colorful leaves that are releasing and letting go and floating to the ground. It's strange that we delight in the autumn. And I'll bet for some of you that autumn is your favorite time of the year. But when it comes to personal change, it's not always the case, that there is resistance. Perhaps we delight in autumn because it is a predictable change. And the changes in our lives, they are often surprises. This troubles us. But perhaps it shouldn't, because life is pure mystery. We breathe in mystery. It enfolds us, it indwells us. From moment to moment, it's all mystery. We really don't know what is coming. We try to live our lives as if there's no mystery, but mystery is there and it is a constant companion. Perhaps we delight in that autumn because it is so predictable. But change isn't the problem, it's our resistance to change. That's the issue. And so, like the leaves of autumn, let us let go and allow that presence of God, that's symbolized maybe by the wind or by the force of gravity or by a gentle rain, that just nudges those leaves and causes them to tumble and spin and twist as they move onto the ground. It's a wonder. It's the beauty of change. And I would say to you that God is in the midst of the change of your life, just as surely as God is in the leaf that is twisting and turning and tumbling to the earth. Can we consider that the change of our lives is just as beautiful as the change of autumn. And so let us open ourselves to it. The autumn speaks to us of change. Let us embrace it. And now I'd like to have my lovely wife, Nancy, come, and she's going to share something that I've written that sort of sets the tone for our time together today, called The Sacred Human. And then she has some beautiful readings that she selected that I know will be an inspiration to you. So here's my lovely wife, Nancy.
Welcome to our home, friends. The Sacred Human. We are born of water and spirit. We are human and divine. But what is the role of our humanity in our spiritual journey? As spiritual beings, as children of God, we have an immense capacity for creativity and for loving. The challenge is to release the imprisoned splendor. Problems call for creativity, and our humanity calls for love. For unless we accept our humanity, we won't be able to express our divinity. It's time for us to remember that our humanity is just as precious as our divinity. Both are part of the divine plan. They are woven together in the fabric of our being. The acceptance of our humanity with its frailties, guilt, and shame opens the door of our souls so the true self can emerge and bring love, compassion, and empathy to the world. Today, dear friends, is the day it begins. Today, we no longer shun our fears and failures. We accept them as part of our spiritual journey and watch in delight as this love of self, even the darkest parts of ourselves, calls for the expression of the God that dwells in us. And as Jim continues his series on the Creed of the Heart, this morning's lesson is Our Race is Human, from Rosa Parks. You must never be fearful about what you are doing when it's right, from Peace Pilgrim. Humanity has only scratched the surface of its real potential. Marie Curie. Each of us must work for his own improvement and at the same time share a general responsibility for all of humanity. Mother Teresa. If we have no peace, it is because we have forgotten that we belong to one another. Pope Francis. Embrace with tender affection the whole of humanity, especially the poorest, the weakest, the least important. And the Dalai Lama, the future of humanity is in our hands. These words from Kristen Neff. Happiness is not dependent on circumstances being exactly as we want them to be, or on ourselves being exactly the way we'd like to be. Rather, happiness stems from loving ourselves and our lives exactly as they are, knowing that joy and pain, strength and weakness, glory and failure are all essential to the full human experience. Gautama Buddha. You can search throughout the entire universe for someone who is more deserving of your love and affection than you are yourself. And that person is not to be found anywhere. You yourself, as much as anybody in this entire universe, deserve your love and affection. Shannon Abels. What self-acceptance does is open up more possibilities of succeeding because you aren't fighting yourself along the way. And finally, this from Byron Katie. It's not your job to like me, it's mine.
I love those readings. You know, it's from all kinds of different cultures and religious leaders and normal people like you and me. And yet they have a message. We all kind of have these themes and beautiful truths that are running through us, and they're emerging in people all over the world, all through time. and even to this day. So friends, this is the third lesson in a series of 4 lessons entitled The Creed of the Heart. And our lesson today is Our Race is Human. And if you'll remember the 3 proclamations of the creed, our God is love, our race is human, our religion is oneness. In our very first lesson, I just sort of summarized each one of those. And then I said in the lessons that would follow, this is one of them, that we would go into greater depth of each one of these proclamations. And so today, we're going into greater depth of our race is human. And you may remember when I first introduced that, I introduced this one dimension of our race is human, in which someone would ask for a survey, and you would answer the questions, and then they'd want some demographic information, basically about the pigmentation of your skin. Are you Caucasian or Black or Asian or Native American or whatever it might be. That happens whether it's a survey over the phone or whether it's a warranty card that you fill out for electronics or for the census that is taking place in our country even now. So that's one dimension of the idea of our race as human. But there's a greater truth about us, and we have to expand this idea of our race as human. And we do so with these words, that we are born of water and spirit. That's something Jesus said to a man named Nicodemus, who was a member of the Sanhedrin, the religious authority in his time, that this man came to visit Jesus by night. Metaphysically, it means he came in ignorance, and that was certainly true, but he also didn't want to be seen by others, actually coming to be with Jesus. And Jesus said to him, we are born of water and spirit. We're human and divine. We have this immense capacity as spiritual beings, as children of God. We're made of love. Divinity is the truth about our being. We have this great capacity. And let me give you an example of it. There were 2 brothers. One was 9 or 10 years old, and the other was a young teenager. And the young teenager needed a blood transfusion, and his younger brother had the same blood type. And so the parents and the doctor sat down with the younger brother, one that was 9 or 10, and explained to him about a blood transfusion and that his brother needed blood, and asked if he would consent to the transfusion. And so he seemed a little puzzled, but he said, okay. And so the day of the procedure was taking place, and it was underway with this young man. And in the midst of it, the doctor was nearby, and the young man or young boy said to the doctor, hear these words. He said, when am I going to die? That's what I mean by the capacity. You see, the doctor realized that the young boy didn't fully understand about a transfusion. And he thought that by consenting to this, that he making this sacrifice, that he was actually giving his life for his brother, but he was willing to do it. And that speaks of this immense capacity that we have for love and for sacrifice and for selflessness. So there was that dimension to our being born of spirit. But then we're born of water as well. We're human beings. I want to read to you something from the Araya Mountain Dreamers book. It's called The Invitation, and it's kind of long, but I want to read it to you. It speaks of our humanity, and you can try to do this yourself. I'll do it as well, but condense this invitation to just one statement. What is it really saying? Here's the invitation. It doesn't interest me what you do for a living. I want to know what you ache for. And if you dare to dream of meeting your heart's longing, it doesn't interest me how old you are. I want to know if you will risk looking like a fool for love, for your dreams, for the adventure of being alive. It doesn't interest me what planets are squaring your moon. I want to know if you have touched the center of your sorrow, if you have been opened by life's betrayals, or have you been shriveled and closed by the fear of future pain. I want to know if you can sit with pain, mine or your own, without moving to hide it or fade it or fix it. I want to know if you can be with joy, mine or your own, if you can dance with wildness and let the ecstasy fill you to the tips of your fingers and toes without cautioning us to be careful, be realistic, or to remember the limitations of being human. It doesn't interest me if the story you're telling me is true. I want to know if you can disappoint another to be true to yourself, if you can bear the accusation of betrayal and not betray your own soul, if you can be faithful and therefore be trustworthy. I want to know if you can see beauty even when it is not present every day, and if you can source your own life from its presence. I want to know if you can live with failure, yours and mine, and still stand on the edge of the lake and shout to the silver of the full moon, yes. It doesn't interest me to know where you live or how much money you have. I want to know if you can get up after the night of grief and despair and weary and bruised to the bone and do what needs to be done for the children. It doesn't interest me what you know or how you come to be here. I want to know if you will stand in the center of the fire with me and not shrink back. It doesn't interest me where or what or with whom you have studied. I want to know what sustains you from the inside when all else falls away. I want to know if you can be alone with yourself and truly like the company you keep in the empty moments. That's really something, isn't it? How do you take something like that invitation and how do you distill it down to a few words? And you can do that yourself. I would want you to do that. But here's my distillation. I think it's asking, are you fully alive? Are you fully alive? We have to be fully human, I think, in order to be fully divine. They come together. We want this place, this unity of Blairsville, to be a place where you can be who you are. I would desire for us that we would accept one another just the way we are. We, with the guilt and the shame and the warts and all, and I have a feeling that if we can do that, interestingly enough, accept our humanity, then that's when the Christhood, that's when the divinity begins to be expressed. And so the foundation statement for what I'm saying to you today is this, that unless you can accept your humanity, you won't be able to express your divinity. Let me say that to you again. I want you to remember it. Unless you can accept your humanity, you won't be able to express your divinity. That, my friends, is one of the most important realizations that ever come to me in my life. My life changed when that began to move in me. Your humanity is just as precious as your divinity. I'll give you an example. Jesus is standing before the tomb of Lazarus. He's been dead for a number of days. He's late in being there. And Lazarus' family is behind Jesus. And being there near the tomb, they are crying and weeping and sobbing, and being there just brought back all these emotions again. And Jesus knows what's going to happen, but something strange happens. And it isn't Lazarus rising out of the tomb, coming out of the tomb. It's the shortest verse in the Bible. You remember that? You learned that in Sunday school. The shortest verse in the Bible is that Jesus wept. Why did he weep? He knew there was going to be incredible joy that in a short period of time, Lazarus was going to come out of that tomb. And yet Jesus weeps. Why? And the reason is that the humanity he heard behind him, all those sobs and the tears and the crying, it touched him. And he joined them. He cried as well. In the same way that if I was to sit here before you and I was to start to cry, many of you would join me. And you wouldn't even know why I was crying, but you would join me. And if you know me, I might not even know why I'm crying myself, but I'd be crying as well. So our humanity is something that's very precious, and we have that story to one of them to illustrate it to us. I call this the sacred human. And this acceptance of our humanity is immensely important. There was a woman I met years ago, her name was Donna. She came to me, I was the minister of Unity Temple on the Plaza in Kansas City. And she came and she said, Jim, I'm 70 pounds overweight and I want you to help me lose those pounds. And in years past, I would have probably, talked to her about some affirmations and denials and maybe some imagery or buying a one dress size smaller than another. Who knows what I would have said to her. But this time I didn't do that. I said to her, as a spiritual being, it doesn't matter whether you gain 10 pounds or you lose the weight. That's not the issue. The issue is that you know who and what you are. It wasn't long after that that I left that job as minister of Unity Temple in the Plaza. I went to Unity Village with Nancy and we worked there. And about a year later, Donna, who gave me permission to tell this story, by the way, she contacted us and she said, "You'll be delighted to know I've lost that weight." And I said, "Well, that's wonderful. Why don't you come out to Unity Inn and let's have a meal together. Let's eat." And so she came on out and Nancy and I sat down with her at Unity Inn and we talked and she explained to me what took place that day, what really happened. And what she said is that when you said to me, it doesn't matter whether I gain another 10 or I lose the weight, that what she got from me was I was accepting her as she was. And that was the beginning of her accepting herself as she was. And it wasn't until she began to accept herself as she was, her humanity, that the change began to take place, that something else began to be expressed from within her. So it's an illustration of how this foundation principle works. Accept myself as I am, then something greater can emerge from within me. There once was a man who believed his God did not love him. In fact, he believed that his God loved his brother more. And so this man killed his brother. And the murderer was banished to the land of Nod. Nod means aimless or wandering. So he's wandering, he's living this aimless, purposeless life. So what story is this? This is the story of Cain and Abel. And if you remember the story, a mark was put on Cain because the law was an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. You murder another and then your life is forfeit as well. But God put a mark on Cain, the mark of Cain, and it declared, do not hurt this one, do not harm this one. And it must have had more of a message than that, because if by putting that mark upon him that said, do not harm this one, Cain must have been precious to God. If he wasn't precious to God, just let him die at the hand of another. But that was not what was to be. And so I speculate, now this is not in the scripture, but I can see Cain and he's meandering in this land of Nod. And he's coming to people's homes. Maybe he's hungry, he needs water, and he knocks on the door and they open the door. And at first they're repulsed by him and his appearance, he's all disheveled. And then they see this mark on him. And it says, don't harm this one. He's precious to me. And so they began to treat him with the utmost respect. They invite him in and they clean him up and they give him food, maybe clothes to wear before he goes forth in his wandering, because he has something to discover and to learn. Because I asked the question, how long will it take Cain to realize that he was precious to God? And the better question is for us, which is how long will it take us, complete with our shame and our guilt and our regrets and the things we've done wrong and so forth, how long will it take us to realize that we are precious to God? And one of the things that's going to be required is we're going to have to learn to accept ourselves the way we are. Because we all fail. We all fall down. Failure is not the problem. Think of a child who's learning to walk. How many times does that child fall? Again and again and again, but they get up again. And here's the question. What cosmic significance does that child place on the fact that they fall down, the child falls down? And the answer is no cosmic significance. But what we do is we have our errors, we fail, and we place cosmic significance to it. and it is our great difficulty. Our most grievous error, and hear this, our most grievous error is that we try to fix and repair ourselves and pour all that energy in that fixing and repairing, where what we really need to do is pour our energy into loving and accepting ourselves as we are. That's where our energy needs to be poured. And then the changes begin to take place and the divinity begins to be expressed. And you know how it is when you've made some mistake, you have some memory of something, have you noticed how it just keeps coming back into our consciousness again and again and again, and we have a tendency to think of it as an intrusion and we want to push it aside. But I think that's actually part of the healing. I think what happens with it coming back in and coming back in, we can allow it in, and eventually, because it's just so persistent, it will lose its power if we allow it to do that. Let me give you an example, although it illustrates the principle, although it's a positive one. When I was in ministerial school, one evening I wrote a poem, and it was late at night, and the poem was called Blessing for a Child. And as I wrote the poem, I cried. And I was in the privacy of our own home, and it was just me and the Lord of my being and the poem. And I wrote the poem and I cried. I had a classmate, his name was Howard Caesar, and Howard and Diane had a child named Diane. And I remember the day that after the child was born, Howard actually came up the freight elevator in the administration building on a motorcycle, and he had a bunch of cigars. He was passing them all out. And when something wonderful like this would happen in the class, the chaplain would give a blessing. And I lived almost next door to Howard. We were good friends, and Nancy and Diane. And I asked if I could do the blessing. And so I had this poem, The Blessing for a Child. And so I started reading the poem. And as I did, all the emotion just flooded back on me. And I was crying there in front of my class and realized I entered ministerial school having come fresh from the military. I was a naval aviator. Believe me, in naval aviation, you do not cry. That is not part of what you do. And so I was embarrassed. I was very uncomfortable with that taking place. And I struggled my way through the poem and did the blessing. But it did disturb me. And so what I did was as I went to work, I was a teaching tennis pro at the time. It took me 45 minutes to go from our home to where I was teaching, and then 45 minutes back. And so what I would do is that, and this is what I was talking about, letting those memories and those emotions and thoughts, whatever it is, just let them come, let them come, let them come. Because I would call all that emotion back up by reciting the poem as I drove to work and back from work. And as I did it, I would cry again. It was in the privacy of my car. People looking over probably wondered, what's wrong with that guy? But I did that, and eventually I could read that poem or recite that poem without the emotion, that I had come to a sense of peace with it and with myself. You understand? So what happens with us sometimes is we have this dimension of ourselves that we just try to push it aside, but it's a sacred part of us. It's like a hurt child. And I mean, if we were together and a child was hurt and crying in front of us, what would happen? I mean, one or the other of us would get to that child first, and we'd pick him up and we'd hold him and we'd say, what's wrong? Tell me what happened. It's going to be okay. Then we just hold them and squeeze them. That's what we do with a hurt child. But this part of us that's like that, no, we don't do that. We just try to push it aside. And you know, when I first got in Unity, I thought I had found, it was so positive. I thought I found a way that I could just push aside these parts of myself, that sacred humanity, just cover it over with all my affirmations and denials, and use them, not my truth, almost like some kind of a shield. And I realized that wasn't what I was supposed to do, even though I did it for quite a period of time, years literally. And that's why some people have been in unity for years and they're not getting it done. And the reason is they think they found a way to kind of push all this stuff aside. And this sacred humanity needs to be embraced. And the most important thing is we need to accept it. See, I was always trying to change my humanity. And I found the issue is not trying to change it. It's trying to accept it and love it. And for those of you that have been in the class with me, you know, recently just living the mystical life today, what we're trying to do in prayer meditation is accept these parts of us as they begin to emerge. Years ago, as these ideas were stirring in me, Nancy and I had a not-for-profit called Inner Journey. We decided that we had people on our list, mailing list, that were from all over the country, all over the world. We decided we would have a retreat in the Kansas City area. We didn't know if anybody would come. And we sent out notice about this, and we acquired the place where we would be, and people came. They came from Australia. They came from Kentucky. They came from New Jersey. They came from everywhere. And that first night of that particular retreat, the very first one, these ideas were beginning to stir and move in me. And I talked about the sacred human. And we were all in a circle, and I had a candle in the middle. And I stood in the center of that circle. I was first, and I stood and I looked at everybody and I said, will you accept me just the way I am? And the group responded in unison, we accept you just the way you are. And then each person individually came to the center of that circle next to that candle of light, that Christ candle, and they said, won't you accept me just the way I am? And everybody responded, we accept you just the way you are. Now, Nancy was there, I was there, and I'm here to tell you that there is another person who's with us today, my friend Chris Lohr, who shows up, by the way, as Sharon Turner for some reason on the screen there. But Chris Lohr was there. She was one of those people. She can testify. She stood in that circle and she said to everybody, will you accept me just the way I am? And she heard that response, we accept you just the way you are. It set the tone for the retreat. It was kind of funny. Sometimes somebody would be sharing something of some depth in their soul, and someone would just kind of shout out, we accept you just the way you are. So our humanity, friends, it is part of the divine plan. We're born of water and spirit. And the first law of love is acceptance. That's what love does first. It accepts. And so I would say to you that the mark of Cain is on us all. For God is saying to each one of us and to all the world about each one of us that don't harm this one. This one is precious to me. Do you know how precious you really are? And so it is. Amen. Well, friends, as we've been together, we're doing this each time. We come together once a month, and that is share some thoughts with you. And then what's important, most important, is not what I say, but what you will hear emerging from within you. So we take this time for prayer and meditation after the lesson so that we can ponder and meditate upon these ideas and just see what emerges within us. So if you would now, why don't you just close your eyes and let's just pause together and give attention to the great truth that our race is human. So breathe deeply. Just release it and let it go. And once more, just feel the rise and fall of your chest. And as it rises and falls, just sense the peace And let it be as if you were there with Jesus and Nicodemus, and you can hear Jesus say, born of water, we're human, born of spirit. We are to awaken spiritually. And often it happens in quiet moments just like this one. And as we are still, memories rise up and thoughts and feelings and images. And love is brought to bear. I accept my humanity just the way it is. I will be and I am fully human, so I can be fully divine. And love is the answer. To accept myself just the way I am. I fall, I stumble, and place no cosmic significance upon it. I rise up again. And rise not just to stand on my 2 feet and to stand tall, but to rise higher in mind and heart, to know that my race is human. And I am to be fully human, fully alive, fully divine. Just think of those 6 words, fully human, fully alive, fully divine, how they are woven together in a great tapestry of life. I see it on others and it must be on me. The mark of Cain. God is saying of each of us, this one's precious to me. Don't harm this one. Please don't harm this one. This one's precious to me. And so I dare to let the words run through my mind. I am precious to God. Fully human, fully alive, fully divine, precious to God. It seems that is enough. Time to rest in the silence, in the quiet. Those simple words, fully human, fully alive, fully divine. And that great realization, I'm precious to God. How long will it be before I realize I am precious to God? Let it be now in the silence. Fully human, fully alive, fully divine, precious to God. What a day this shall be, and all the days to follow, if I can only remember my race is human. And this time of prayer and meditation is sealed with these words: Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. You give us this day our daily bread. You forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. You lead us not into temptation. You deliver us from error. For yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Just take a deep breath. Let it bring you back gently to this place and time where we stand together, are together. And so it is. Amen. Other than Nancy, I know you all are far away from me in miles, but well, I can feel your silence, I think. I can feel it. Well, we've come to another sacred time in our service. It's one of giving. Giving is part of our nature. It's who we are as spiritual beings. Nothing is more natural than to give, to be a generous person. And so if you would just kind of take a gift and hold it in your mind or in your hand that you're going to be sharing with Unity of Blairsville, and just open our hearts, open our minds, open our hands to give. And we declare divine love flowing through me, blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I receive. I am grateful. And so it is. Amen. So I think there's a link in this Zoom below that you'll be able to share a love offering if you so desire with Unity of Blairsville, and hopefully you will. You know, just a personal note, Nancy and I are living up here in the mountains, and the skies are dark up here. And many of you are probably not aware, Nancy and I, some of you are, Nancy and I used to be amateur astronomers in the sense we had a 3-story observatory with a big 10-foot diameter dome around it and a 14-inch telescope. We did some pretty serious stuff with astronomy down in Lake of the Ozarks. When we moved to Florida, and there was a lot of light pollution there, and we lived in a place where, you know, we couldn't, a couple places where we really couldn't do much viewing of the sky, but now we can. And so we've got some telescopes again. We're working on getting ours all calibrated. And my goodness, every time I get up in the middle of the night, I go and I look outside, and I don't know if you're aware, but you know, Saturn's out there right now, and Jupiter's out there, and 4 o'clock in the morning in the southwest, Mars is there, and it won't be like this again till about the year 2032 or so. It's past its what they call opposition, but it's just the sky out there is just gorgeous. So grab yourself some hot cocoa or some decaf coffee in the middle of the night. Go out there and take a look at the beautiful sky, and it'll give you that great sense of wonder of just how incredible is the universe in which we live. Well, we have some blessing to do. So we bless our children that you are loved, special, and important. We give thanks for all those who tell the truth, speak the truth, and live the truth. You are my inspiration. You are my example. And a blessing to the world, one mind, one heart, one great soul, the creed of our heart. Our God is love, our race is human, our religion is oneness. And we conclude with our prayer for protection. The light of God surrounds us, the love of God enfolds us, the power of God protects us, the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is
well.
And so it is.
Yay, God.
Amen. And let me go to gallery view so I can see some good looking people there.